Hi everyone. Today my presentation is on the topic endangered marine polyps, threats and conservation. So before moving to details, I'd like to give an introduction, a brief introduction about polyps. So polyps are actually building blocks of corals. As you can see in this picture, corals are made up of colonies of hundreds to thousands of tiny individual polyps. And these marine invertebrate animals, they had hard exoskeletons. These exoskeletons are made of calcium carbonate and they are sessile. That means they're attached to a surface and they do not move. The coral polyps, when they're attached to a hard surface, they won't move. And these polyps, they have 1 to 3 millimeter diameter and they grow slowly, forming different shapes and sizes depending on their species. But though they are like very tiny, the entire colony can grow large and the colony can weigh several tons. In this colonies, as I mentioned, it consists of millions of polyps and they actually grow attached to the limestone remainings of former colonies or any hard surface, and they eventually grow forming massive reefs. So let's see anatomy of coral reef. So towards the right hand side of this slide, you can see a picture. So the coral structure, it has living structure in the skeletal hard part. So the living part is called polyp. So the polyp structure, it consists of mouth. You can see in this picture, mouth is located at the center and it's used for feeding and expelling waste. And then it has tentacles. These tentacles surround the mouth and it's equipped with stinging cells to capture phytoplanktons. And these stinging cells, they are called nematocytes. And after that, they have a gastrovascular cavity, like sac-like digestive system where food is broken down. So that's about the living part, about the polyp. Then these corals got skeletal part, which is the hard part made of calcium carbonate. So the skeletal structure, the calcium carbonate structure, that is secreted by polyps to form a protective cup-like base. So over time, these skeletal structures build up, forming coral reefs. And in this picture, you can see zooxanthellae in this picture. And these zooxanthellae are symbiotic algae. And these tiny algae, they live inside the coral tissue. And it provides energy to the polyps through photosynthesis, which helps corals to grow. And this zooxanthellae, these algae are responsible for the color of the coral reefs. So that's one polyp, but multiple polyps will be connected through living tissue. And through these living tissue, it will be sharing nutrients, and that living tissue actually helps these corals to form massive reef structures. So let's see more about this zooxanthellae. So when we consider feeding, 90% of the coral's energy comes from the photosynthesis performed by these zooxanthellae. So corals provide habitat, or corals host zooxanthellae. In return, these algae, they will provide sugars and oxygen to the phytoplankton, to the polyps. And this process also gives corals their color, as I mentioned. And that's about 90% of corals' energy. But corals itself, they can capture phytoplanktons and organic particles. So at night, these coral polyps, they extend their tentacles to catch phytoplanktons and small organic particles from water. And their special stinging cells on the tentacles, they will paralyze prey, which then move to the mouth for digestion. So here you can see a picture where this tiny circular things are called zooxanthellae, the algae, and it is present inside the cell of polyps, the corals. So why these polyps are important? we can just have a look at details. So polyps are the foundation of coral reefs. So they build massive reef structures in creating habitat for marine life. I can say that coral reefs are the hotspots, biodiversity hotspots, or rainforest of the sea, because coral reefs just cover less than 1% of the marine environment, but it supports 25% of all marine species, including fish, mollusks, and crustaceans. In terms of coastal protection, reefs acts like a natural barrier, reducing coastal erosion and protecting shorelines from storms. Then they have very important role in carbon and nutrient cycling. Polyps, they contribute to carbon sequestration through photosynthesis, and they maintain nutrient balance in the ocean. Considering the economic and human benefits, coral reefs support fishing, tourism, and medicine, and thereby it benefits millions of people worldwide. But the problem is coastal destruction or coral destruction. So report says that 50% of world's coral reefs have been lost since 1950, and 14% of the corals have been lost between 2009 and 2018 alone. And the heat wave events, massive bleaching events, occurs very frequently these days, and it occurs very frequent, like within 5 to 10 years instead of 20 years time period which happened before. So if this current trends continue, 90% of the coral reefs could be gone by 2050. That's the current status. Like reports suggest that 90% of the coral reef would be gone by 2050 if this rate continues. So let's see more detail about the causes of marine polyp disruption. The main reason is climate change and coral bleaching. So what happens is when the ocean temperature increases, it causes zooxanthellae to leave the corals. Why? Because when it's high temperature, zooxanthellae will be performing photosynthesis in a stressed condition, and instead of producing oxygen, it will produce variables of oxygen like oxide ions, and that's actually toxic to the polyps. So polyp will try to expel zooxanthellae because it's producing toxic components. So once zooxanthellae leaves the polyp or coral structure, that leads to bleaching and starvation of the coral. So that is clearly shown in this picture. So when zooxanthellae are present, corals will be colored and healthy, because 90% of the food and oxygen comes from the zooxanthellae's photosynthesis. But under stressed conditions, corals will try to expel zooxanthellae because of the toxic components they produce under stressed conditions. When zooxanthellae leaves coral, it gets bleached and coral bleaching occurs. Same with ocean acidification. Due to human activities, there is increased carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, and that leads to ocean acidification. And when ocean water becomes acidic, it makes polyps hard to develop calcium carbonate skeleton. So acidification increases, more coral bleaching occurs. And you can see this picture here towards the right hand side, like 3 different scenarios. The first one you can see like A. The scenario A is when the carbon dioxide level is like 375 ppm, which was before, like after industrialization. So when this carbon dioxide level was there, ocean pH was 8.2 and corals were healthy. But the current situation, when I checked the current carbon dioxide atmospheric concentration, it's 425 ppm. Once it touches 450 to 500 ppm, ocean acidification will intensify and the pH level will drop to 7.9, and that will lead to coral destruction and bleaching. But if it further drops to 7.8, that will lead to like complete destruction of coral reefs. So that's the scenario. And there are more causes of coral destruction, including pollution, overfishing, and coastal development and tourism. In terms of pollution, plastic waste, oil spills, and chemicals. These harmful chemicals, they are harmful for coral polyps and that will disrupt reef ecosystems. When we talk about overfishing, there is ways of fishing like dynamite fishing and cyanide fishing using like cyanide chemical and bottom trawling. So these ways of fishing, they will physically destroy coral habitats and coral reefs. What about tourism is that for coastal development, dredging, construction, and land runoff happens and it's smoother. It smoothens the corals and reduces the water quality. And the extraction of corals for unregulated tourism causes physical damage to corals. And when we go to all these coastal areas, we use sunscreens, right? So this main chemical component in the sunscreen is oxybenzone. These oxybenzones are very harmful to corals. So these chemicals will lead to coral bleaching and even DNA damage of coral larvae. So that will influence the reproduction and proper structure of coral reefs. So to prevent these, we can take conservation efforts. The first and foremost thing is reducing climate change impact, cutting carbon dioxide emissions. So this carbon dioxide emissions, if we reduce, that can slow global warming and acidification, and eventually that can help corals to get healthier, and promoting renewable energy sources will eventually helps corals. Then coral reef restoration, coral farming and transplantation, because corals, they can grow from buds and asexual reproduction happens. It actually grows from the coral buds. So coral farming and transplantation can help corals to thrive. Then the same artificial reefs can be grown to create new habitats. Then marine protected areas, establishing this no fishing zones in reef areas can protect coral reefs. In addition to that, monitoring efforts should be taken so that reefs are growing or how they are thriving in heat waves and other conditions. So scientific research can be done on that, and sustainable tourism and fishing. So promoting reef safe sunscreens and encouraging eco-friendly fishing practices can help coral reefs. That's it from me. Thank you.